The summons arrived in the least impressive way possible, which in Jordan's experience was usually how important things began, quietly and with just enough confusion to make you question whether you should ignore them. A small metallic drone hovered outside his workshop window, tapping against the glass with mechanical persistence until he finally looked up from the half-dismantled engine in front of him. Yeah, I see you," he muttered, wiping grease onto an already defeated cloth. The drone projected a thin beam of light that formed a symbol in the air, elegant, unfamiliar, and far too refined for anything in the lower city. Jordan squinted at it. "That's either a royal seal," he said to himself, "or someone's very fancy way of selling insurance." The drone beeped once, as if mildly offended. He leaned back, arms crossed. "If this is about unpaid taxes, I fix machines, not financial regrets." The beam shifted, displaying a message in precise, glowing script. Jordan read it once, then again. "You are hereby summoned to the palace." He blinked. "Right," he said slowly, "and I'm hereby busy." The drone did not leave. Jordan sighed. "Of course you don't have a sense of humor." He stood, stretching his back with a faint groan, and glanced around his workshop. Tools scattered everywhere, parts that may or may not belong to anything specific, and a cooling unit that had been making suspicious noises for 3 days but hadn't exploded yet, which counted as a success. "Fine," he said, grabbing his jacket. "If this is a prank, I'm billing someone." The journey upward, from the layered chaos of the lower city to the polished heights of the Palace District, felt like stepping through entirely different worlds stacked on top of each other. Down below, everything buzzed and clanged and argued with itself. Up here, everything hummed quietly, as if it had already decided it was better than you. Jordan followed the drone, which floated ahead with unwavering confidence, leading him through wide corridors lined with smooth, glowing surfaces that seemed less like walls and more like ideas pretending to be walls. He tried not to touch anything. "Last time I touched something expensive, it turned into 3 smaller expensive problems," he muttered. The doors to the grand hall opened before he could change his mind, and suddenly he was standing at the edge of something vast. The space stretched upward and outward in ways that made his sense of scale quietly give up. Figures stood arranged in deliberate patterns, tall and composed, their long ears catching the soft ambient light like subtle declarations of difference. Their clothing flowed with a precision that suggested it had never known dust, which already made Jordan suspicious. He took one step forward, then another. Every sound seemed too loud. His boots, his breathing, the faint shift of fabric as heads began to turn toward him. "Great," he whispered. "Audience. Love that." He was halfway through deciding whether to stand still or pretend he had somewhere else to be when it happened. "Mother, that's him! That's the human I told you about!" The voice cut through the hall with a clarity that ignored every unspoken rule of quiet dignity. Jordan froze, instinctively looking over his shoulder. There was no one behind him. "Ah," he said under his breath, "that's not ideal." He turned slowly, and there she was, standing among the court as if she belonged there, because apparently she did, was the same woman who had stood in his workshop weeks ago, staring at a broken transport like it had personally betrayed her. Her appearance hadn't changed. She still looked almost entirely human, strikingly so, except for those long, elegant ears that curved back from her head. But everything else had changed. The way she stood, the way the room seemed to orient itself around her, the way everyone else reacted without reacting at all. "Princess." The word landed in his mind with the subtlety of a dropped engine block. "You," Jordan said, pointing at her before he could stop himself. "You're—" "Yes," she said, stepping forward with a grin that was far too pleased for someone standing in a royal court. "I am." He stared. "You said you were lost." "I was." "You asked me which button started the engine." She tilted her head. "It was a confusing design." "It had one button." "I like to be thorough." Jordan exhaled slowly, running a hand over his face. "I explained the entire system to you." "And I listened," she said proudly. "You turned it on while I was inside it." A faint ripple moved through the court, like a disturbance they were trying very hard not to acknowledge. "I thought you were done," she replied. I was holding live wiring. You seem confident. I was screaming. That did seem intentional. For a brief moment, silence hovered, fragile, uncertain. Then, unexpectedly, a few quiet sounds slipped through the court. Not quite laughter, but dangerously close. Jordan glanced around. Am I in trouble? No, she said, her voice softening just slightly. You're here because of that day. That's not reassuring. At the center of the hall, a figure stepped forward. Queen Laura. Her presence didn't demand attention. It simply took it, effortlessly. She regarded Jordan with a calm, measuring gaze, as if he were something unfamiliar, but not unwelcome. So, she said, her voice smooth and steady, you are the human who repaired my daughter's transport. Jordan straightened instinctively. I didn't know it was hers, so I have been told. He hesitated. In my defense, she did not act like a princess. Kira crossed her arms. I was undercover. You were asking if the engine needed encouragement. It looked unmotivated. Jordan shook his head. It was on fire. Temporarily, the Queen's expression shifted, just slightly, but enough that the tension in the room bent rather than snapped. And yet, Laura said, you assisted her, respectfully, fairly. Jordan shrugged. It was the job. And if you had known who she was? He paused. Then carefully, I might have charged a little more. This time, the sound that moved through the hall was unmistakable. Laughter, not loud, not uncontrolled, but real. Kira grinned, clearly delighted. The Queen, for just a moment, allowed the smallest hint of amusement to surface. Jordan exhaled quietly. Okay, he said. That went better than expected. But as the attention settled back onto him, not sharp, not hostile, but curious, he realized something had shifted. He had walked into the palace as a stranger. Now somehow, he stood there as something else. Not important, not yet, but no longer invisible. The silence that followed the laughter did not feel empty. It felt observant, like the entire hall had decided, collectively, to take a closer look at Jordan and see what he would do next. He stood there trying not to shift his weight too much, because somehow even standing still here felt like a performance he hadn't rehearsed for. Queen Laura descended the final step toward him with unhurried grace, and the faint glow embedded in the floor seemed to respond to her presence, brightening just enough to follow her movement. Jordan noticed that and immediately decided not to step anywhere that glowed. It felt like the kind of thing that would judge him. You speak plainly, she said. I fix things, Jordan replied. They don't respond well to complicated explanations. A faint murmur passed through a few of the courtiers, though whether it was approval or quiet confusion was hard to tell. Kira, meanwhile, looked entirely pleased, as if every word he said was confirming something she had already decided. Laura studied him for another moment. My daughter tells me you treated her as you would any other citizen. I did, Jordan said. Then he hesitated. Though in hindsight, most citizens don't try to start their vehicles while I'm inside them. Kira lifted her chin. It was a learning experience. For me, Jordan said, mostly involving sparks. That earned another restrained ripple of amusement. It seemed the court was slowly adjusting to the idea that conversation could include things like humor, a dangerous precedent, Jordan suspected. You did not attempt to take advantage of her, the Queen continued. Many would have. Jordan frowned slightly. For fixing a broken transport? For recognizing an opportunity? He shrugged. I recognized a broken intake valve. Kira leaned closer, lowering her voice just enough to feel conspiratorial. You also gave me a discount. That was because you tried to pay me with a decorative coin that definitely wasn't currency. It was valuable. It was shaped like a star and glowing. It's ceremonial. It was humming. She paused. I thought that was normal. Jordan blinked at her. Nothing about that was normal. Their exchange lingered in the air for a moment, and Jordan became aware that several members of the court were watching them with expressions that suggested this was not how conversations usually unfolded in the presence of the Queen, which he realized was probably true. Laura turned her gaze briefly toward Kira. You have spoken highly of him. Kira straightened slightly, though her tone remained steady. He didn't know who I was. And he still treated me with respect. He didn't rush me, didn't mock me, and didn't overcharge me. That's rare. Jordan scratched his cheek. I feel like the bar shouldn't be that low. It is, Kira replied. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. That's concerning. The Queen's attention returned to him, her expression thoughtful rather than stern. Skill can be taught. Integrity is less predictable. Jordan shifted slightly. I mostly just try not to make things worse. That is often a valuable skill in itself. He considered that. You should see me on a bad day. Kira glanced at him. Was I one of those? You turned the engine on while I was inside it, he said flatly. She smiled faintly. And yet, you're here. That's still under review. A soft sound, almost a sigh, almost a laugh, escaped from somewhere among the advisors, though no one openly acknowledged it. The rigid atmosphere of the hall had begun to bend, just enough that Jordan no longer felt like he might accidentally shatter it by breathing wrong. Laura stepped slightly to the side, gesturing toward the vast interior of the palace beyond the hall. The systems that maintain this place are complex. They require constant attention. Jordan followed her gesture, noticing for the first time the subtle patterns of light moving along the walls, like energy flowing through hidden channels. It wasn't just decoration, it was infrastructure. He leaned forward slightly, squinting. That's not just lighting, is it? No, the Queen said. It is part of the palace's core network. Jordan nodded slowly. I thought so. It's fluctuating. A few heads turned sharply at that. Kira blinked. Fluctuating? Very slightly, he said. But yeah, that section, he pointed without hesitation, is compensating for something. Probably a minor imbalance, but if it keeps doing that, it'll stress the system. One of the royal engineers stepped forward, clearly unable to stay silent. The system is stable. Jordan glanced at him. For now, it has been calibrated precisely. And now it's drifting, Jordan replied. Not much, but enough. The engineer hesitated, clearly not expecting to be challenged by someone who still looked like he had just walked out of a repair yard. Kira looked between them, then back at Jordan. You noticed that just by looking? He shrugged. It's the same everywhere. Different scale, different materials, but systems always tell you when something's off. You just have to listen. The hall grew quieter, not tense, but attentive in a different way now. Laura regarded him with renewed interest. And if you are correct, Jordan exhaled lightly, then something small needs fixing before it becomes something expensive. Kira smiled slightly. You always say that. Because it's always true. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the Queen nodded once. Walk with me. Jordan blinked. That sounds official. It is. He glanced at Kira. Should I be worried? She tilted her head. Only a little. Great, he muttered, falling into step as Laura turned and began moving deeper into the palace. The glowing patterns along the walls shifted as they passed, reacting subtly, as if aware of the Queen's presence, and now reluctantly his. Jordan kept his hands at his sides, resisting the urge to touch anything. If something explodes, he said quietly, I'm blaming the hallway. Kira walked beside him, her expression somewhere between amused and thoughtful. The hallway will not accept that responsibility. That's unfair, he said. It already judges me. It does prefer people who know where they're going. Jordan looked ahead, then back at her. I'm following the Queen. That counts. Barely. He sighed. I knew I should have stayed with the broken engines. But as they moved forward, past walls that pulsed with quiet energy, past doors that opened without being asked, past a world that felt both impossibly advanced and strangely familiar, Jordan realized something he hadn't expected. This place wasn't perfect. It was maintained. And that meant, sooner or later, it would need fixing. The deeper levels of the palace felt less like a place people lived in and more like a place systems thought in. The walls no longer shimmered for beauty. They pulsed with purpose. Lines of faint light traveled beneath smooth surfaces in intricate paths, intersecting, diverging, correcting themselves in ways that made Jordan slow his pace without realizing it. Okay, he murmured, leaning slightly to one side as if listening to something invisible. This place definitely has opinions. Kira walked beside him, hands loosely behind her back. You're doing that thing again. What thing? The one where you look like you're arguing with the air. I'm not arguing, Jordan said. I'm observing. The air just happens to be suspicious. Ahead of them, Queen Laura continued without turning, though there was the faintest suggestion she could hear every word anyway. The corridor widened into a chamber that seemed to stretch far beyond what its exterior should have allowed. At the center, suspended in open space, floated a complex structure of interlocking rings and shifting light, a core of some kind, constantly rotating, constantly adjusting. Jordan stopped. Yeah, he said quietly. That's not just decoration. It is the central distribution nexus, Laura said. It regulates energy flow throughout the palace. Jordan took a slow step forward, eyes narrowing slightly. It's also compensating. Kira crossed her arms. You said that earlier. I meant it earlier too. He circled slightly, watching the rhythm of the rotating rings. The movement was smooth, elegant, but not perfect. There were tiny delays, almost imperceptible, like a heartbeat that occasionally skipped just enough to make you uneasy if you knew what to listen for. There, he said, pointing. That outer ring. It's lagging behind the inner cycle by a fraction of a second. One of the engineers who had followed at a cautious distance stepped forward again, clearly unwilling to let this go. The synchronization is within acceptable parameters. Jordan glanced at him. Acceptable doesn't mean stable. It has functioned this way for years. And it's been drifting for years, Jordan replied. You just haven't noticed because it's been slow. The engineer opened his mouth, then hesitated. Kira looked between them, then at the structure. What happens if it keeps drifting? Jordan exhaled through his nose. Best case, minor inefficiencies, systems working harder than they need to. Worst case, he tilted his head slightly. Something important decides it's had enough and stops cooperating. That sounds vague, she said. That's because systems don't fail all at once, he replied. They fail creatively. The rings shifted again, light cascading through them in a pattern that was almost mesmerizing. Jordan stepped closer, stopping just short of where the floor suddenly changed texture. I'm guessing this is where I'm not supposed to step, he said. Correct, Laura replied. Good, he nodded. I respect boundaries, especially the ones that look expensive. Kira smiled faintly. You're adapting quickly. I like not breaking things that could vaporize me. That is a wise preference. Jordan crouched slightly, observing the base of the structure, where faint conduits extended outward into the floor. This isn't just power distribution, he said. It's balancing load dynamically. Laura inclined her head. Yes, and it's overcompensating in certain sectors. He tapped his temple lightly, which means something upstream isn't behaving the way it used to. The engineer frowned. All upstream systems have been inspected. Recently? Jordan asked. A pause. Within standard intervals. Jordan stood again. Which means no. Kira glanced at the engineer, then back at Jordan. So what's wrong? He spread his hand slightly. Something small. That's not helpful. It never is, he said. Small problems are the worst. They hide. They pretend they're not important. Then one day everything's on fire and everyone's surprised. She considered that. You say that like it's happened before. It has a personality, Jordan said. I don't trust it. There was a moment of quiet, not tense, but focused. The kind of quiet that came when something had shifted from abstract concern to actual possibility. Laura stepped closer to the edge of the chamber, her gaze steady on the rotating structure. And you believe you can correct this? Jordan hesitated, not out of doubt, but out of awareness. This wasn't a broken transport in a crowded street. This was the heart of something vast, intricate, and undeniably important. I think, he said carefully, I can find what's causing it. That was not the question, he exhaled. No system is perfect, but this one is trying too hard to be. That's what's making it unstable. Kira tilted her head. Trying too hard. It's compensating for something it shouldn't have to, Jordan said. like covering for a mistake that hasn't been fixed. The engineer shifted uncomfortably. Our systems do not make mistakes. Jordan looked at him. Everything makes mistakes. The smart ones just hide them better. Kira let out a small breath that might have been a laugh. I like that. I don't, the engineer muttered. That's because you're the one it's hiding from, Jordan replied. Silence again, but this time it felt different. Less rigid, more open. Laura turned slightly, her attention settling fully on Jordan now. If you are to remain here, she said, you will have access to these systems. Jordan blinked. That sounds like responsibility. It is. He glanced at Kira. Is there an option where I just watch and point at things? No, she said immediately. Unfortunate. Laura's expression remained composed, but there was something else beneath it now. Something measured, deliberate. You were brought here because my daughter believes you see things others do not. Jordan rubbed the back of his neck. I mostly see when things are about to break. That is precisely what we require. He looked back at the rotating structure, at the subtle imbalance hidden within its elegance. All right, he said quietly. But if I fix it, Kira raised an eyebrow. You're negotiating again. I just want to be clear, he said. If I fix it, I get to say, I told you so. At least once. She smiled. Twice, he considered. Deal. The engineer looked like he might object, but thought better of it. Jordan took one last look at the system, already mapping patterns in his mind, already tracing possibilities. And for the first time since stepping into the palace, he felt something settle into place. Not comfort, not certainty, but purpose. Okay, he muttered, mostly to himself. Let's find the problem before it decides to introduce itself in a more dramatic way. Kira glanced at him. Do problems here tend to be dramatic? Jordan nodded. They live in a palace. Of course they do. Jordan did not touch the system on the first day. That, he decided, was how professionals avoided becoming very brief historical notes. Instead, he walked. Not casually. There was nothing casual about the way he moved through the palace corridors, but with a slow, deliberate attention that made the environment reveal itself piece by piece. The walls responded subtly as he passed, lines of light adjusting their brightness, faint currents shifting direction, like something alive reconsidering him. I'm being watched, he muttered. You are being monitored, Kira corrected. That's just a more polite word for it. It is a very polite system. It tried to close a door on me. You walked into a restricted corridor. I was curious. The corridor was not. Jordan glanced at the door behind him, which now stood perfectly still, as if it had never tried anything at all. It knows what it did. Kira hid a small smile, though her eyes remained attentive, following the subtle changes in the environment the way he did. She had begun to notice them too. Not as clearly, not yet, but enough to understand that Jordan wasn't imagining things. They entered a long passage where the light patterns ran closer to the surface, almost like veins beneath translucent skin. Jordan slowed, crouching slightly to examine the shifting currents. There, he said quietly. Kira leaned in. What am I looking at? Impatience, he replied. She blinked. That is not a technical term. It is today. He traced the movement of the light with his finger, not touching, just following. See how it speeds up here, then corrects itself? That's not natural flow. That's the system trying to compensate faster than it should. For what? For something dragging behind. Kira straightened slightly, thinking. Like the core you showed me. Exactly, Jordan said. The core's not the problem. It's reacting to the problem. She crossed her arms. So we've been looking at the wrong thing. We've been looking at the symptom, he corrected, which is a great way to stay confused. From behind them, one of the palace engineers cleared his throat, clearly trying to remain patient and clearly failing. You are suggesting, he said carefully, that the issue originates outside the central nexus. I'm suggesting the nexus is doing extra work because something else isn't doing its job, Jordan replied without looking up. All peripheral systems have been verified. Jordan stood, brushing invisible dust from his hands. Then verify them again. The engineer's expression tightened. Our protocols... Those are probably very thorough, Jordan interrupted, turning to face him. But they're also probably designed to confirm what you expect to see. The engineer hesitated. Kira glanced between them, then tilted her head slightly. He has a point. I usually do, Jordan added. That was not an invitation to say that, she said. It felt like one. The engineer exhaled slowly. And where would you begin? Jordan looked down the corridor, then back at the flowing light. Where the system is trying hardest to hide the problem. That is not specific. It will be, Jordan said. Give me a moment. He started walking again, slower this time, eyes scanning not just the walls but the spaces between them, the subtle shifts in sound, the way the air itself seemed to hum differently in certain areas. Kira followed closely. You're listening again. Everything makes noise, he said, even things that are supposed to be silent. I don't hear anything. You will, he replied, eventually. They turned into another corridor, narrower, less ornate. The light here was dimmer, not by design but by function. Jordan stopped abruptly. There, he said. Kira looked around. I don't see anything. Exactly. She frowned. That is not helpful. He gestured toward the wall. The flow here should be stronger. It's a junction point. Instead it's hesitant. Hesitant, she repeated, like it's waiting for something that isn't arriving on time. Kira stepped closer, studying the faint lines of light. So something is delayed. Or weakened, Jordan said. Or both. The engineer approached cautiously, scanning the wall with a handheld device that emitted a soft, steady tone. All readings are within normal parameters. Jordan sighed. Your device is checking if the system is working. That is its function. I'm checking if the system is comfortable, Jordan said. The engineer blinked. Comfort is not a measurable metric. It should be, Jordan muttered. Kira glanced at him. You really think the system can feel something? No, he said, then paused. But I think it behaves like it can. She considered that, then nodded slowly. All right, then what is it feeling? Jordan leaned closer to the wall, eyes narrowing, strained. The word hung there for a moment. Then faintly, so faintly it might have been imagined, the light flickered. Just once. Kira saw it. Her eyes widened slightly. Did you? Yeah, Jordan said quietly. The engineer's device remained steady, unchanged. That was nothing, the engineer insisted. Jordan stepped back slowly. That was something. The flicker did not repeat, but the absence of it felt louder now, like a silence that had something to hide. Kira looked at him. So what do we do? Jordan exhaled, glancing down the corridor as if expecting the walls themselves to answer. We find out why it's struggling, he said, and we do it before it decides to stop being subtle. The engineer frowned. You are assuming failure. I'm assuming honesty, Jordan replied. Systems don't lie. They just delay telling the truth. Kira smiled faintly. You really don't trust anything, do you? Jordan looked at the wall again, at the faint, steady glow that now felt just slightly too controlled. I trust things that admit when they're broken, he said. He straightened, rolling his shoulders slightly as if preparing for something he couldn't yet see. Right now, he added, this place is pretending everything's fine. Kira followed his gaze, her expression shifting, less certainty, more awareness. And you don't believe it? Jordan shook his head once. No, he said. I think it's about to prove me right. The flicker did not return immediately, which made it worse. Jordan stood there a moment longer than necessary, staring at the wall as if it might confess under pressure. It didn't. The light resumed its steady flow, smooth and obedient, as though nothing had happened at all. I don't like it, he said. Kira crossed her arms. You don't like anything in here. That's not true, Jordan replied. I like that nothing has exploded yet. That's very encouraging. The engineer behind them shifted. If there were a fault, the system would report it. Jordan glanced back. It just did. There was no alert. There was a flicker. That is not. It's the system clearing its throat, Jordan interrupted. You can ignore it if you want, but eventually it's going to start yelling. Kira looked at the wall again, more carefully this time. If it's not reporting the issue, Does that mean it doesn't recognize it as a problem? Jordan tilted his head. Or it's trying to solve it on its own? Is that bad? It's like when you ignore a strange noise in your engine and turn the music up, he said. You're not fixing anything. You're just postponing the moment you regret your decisions. Kira smiled faintly. You speak from experience. I speak from expensive experience. He stepped closer again, this time placing his palm just above the surface. Not touching, but close enough to feel the faint heat radiating from beneath. It's working harder here, he murmured. Too hard. The engineer raised his device again. Energy output is within acceptable. Stop saying that, Jordan said, not harshly but firmly. Acceptable just means it hasn't failed yet. The engineer hesitated, then lowered the device slightly. Kira glanced at Jordan. So what's actually wrong? He exhaled slowly, thinking. Something upstream is feeding inconsistent input. Not enough to trigger alarms, but enough to force constant correction. That sounds inefficient. It is, he said, and systems hate inefficiency. As if in response, the light along the wall shifted again. Subtle, almost imperceptible. But this time it lingered a fraction too long before stabilizing. Kira saw it again. There. The engineer frowned, clearly unsettled now. I did not detect any. You're waiting for it to fail loudly, Jordan said. It's not going to do that. Not yet. Kira looked between them. Then how do we make it obvious? Jordan smiled slightly. We don't. She raised an eyebrow. That's not helpful. We stress it, he said. The engineer stiffened. Absolutely not. I didn't say break it, Jordan replied. I said stress it. Controlled. Carefully. We push the system just enough that whatever's hiding can't keep up. That is risky. So is waiting, Jordan said. Kira tilted her head, considering. If we do this, what happens? Jordan shrugged lightly. Best case, the problem reveals itself and we fix it before anything serious happens. And worst case? He paused. Kira narrowed her eyes. Jordan. It reveals itself dramatically. That's not reassuring. It's honest. The engineer stepped forward. The palace cannot risk instability for the sake of a theory. Jordan looked at him. It's not a theory. It's a pattern. And if you are wrong, Jordan smiled faintly, then everything continues to work exactly as it already is. Kira glanced at the wall again, then back at Jordan. And if you're right, he met her gaze, then we stop something small from becoming something very expensive. She was quiet for a moment, then slowly she nodded. What do you need? The engineer turned sharply. Princess, I asked him a question, Kira said calmly. Jordan looked between them, then back at the wall. Access to the local control interface. Just this sector. The engineer hesitated. That requires authorization. Kira didn't look at him. You have it. Another pause. Then reluctantly the engineer stepped toward a nearby panel that seemed invisible until he approached it. The surface shifted, revealing a thin layer of interactive light. Proceed carefully, he said. I always do, Jordan replied. Kira gave him a look. Eventually, he added. He stepped up to the interface, studying it for a moment. The symbols were unfamiliar, but the logic wasn't. Systems, no matter how advanced, always organize themselves around the same fundamental principles. All right, he murmured. Let's see what you're hiding. His fingers moved through the air, not touching, but guiding the interface as it responded to his gestures. Layers of data unfolded, streams of energy distribution, load balancing patterns, micro adjustments happening faster than most could perceive. Kira watched closely. Can you understand all of that? Not all at once, he said, but I don't need to. What are you looking for? Something that doesn't match, he replied. He slowed his movements, focusing on one section of the flow. The numbers, if they could be called that, shifted smoothly, almost perfectly. Almost. There, he said. Kira leaned in. What is it? A delay, Jordan said. Tiny, but consistent. The engineer stepped closer, scanning the same data. That deviation is negligible. It's repeating, Jordan said. That's the problem. Kira frowned. Repeating how? Same interval, same correction pattern. He gestured toward the display. That's not random. That's something feeding bad timing into the system. The engineer's expression tightened. From where? Jordan followed the data stream backward, tracing its origin through layers of interconnected systems. The path led deeper, further than the corridor, further than the sector. Jordan stopped. That's, not local, he said quietly. Kira looked at him. What do you mean? He glanced at her, then back at the display. It's coming from outside this level, he said, somewhere deeper in the palace network. The engineer's voice dropped slightly. That sector is restricted. Jordan exhaled. Of course it is. Kira crossed her arms. Then that's where we go. The engineer hesitated. Princess, that area is important, she said. So is this. Jordan stepped back from the interface, the faint glow reflecting in his eyes. Well, he said, I was hoping for something simple. Kira looked at him. When has it ever been simple? He smiled faintly. It hasn't. I just like pretending. The light along the wall flickered again. Brief, sharp, unmistakable. This time, even the engineer saw it. No one spoke for a moment. Then Jordan nodded once. Yeah, he said quietly. It's getting impatient. The restricted sector did not announce itself with warning signs or guards. It simply resisted. Jordan noticed it the moment they stepped into the corridor leading toward it. The walls, which had previously reacted with subtle responsiveness, now seemed quieter. Too quiet. The light patterns were smoother, almost unnaturally so, like a surface polished until it hid every flaw. I don't like this, he said under his breath. Kira walked beside him, her posture more alert than before. You said that already. I mean it more this time. The engineer trailing behind them hesitated just before the threshold. Access beyond this point is limited. Kira didn't slow. We are not beyond the point yet. That is because we have not crossed it. Jordan stopped and glanced back. Does the point come with consequences? Yes. Defined consequences or mysterious consequences? The engineer frowned. Both. Jordan nodded. Good to know. He turned forward again and took another step. Nothing dramatic happened. No alarms, no sudden lockdown. But the air shifted, subtle, almost psychological. The hum of the palace changed pitch, just slightly, like a system aware that something unfamiliar had entered its awareness. Kira noticed it too. It feels different. Because it is, Jordan said. This part isn't meant to be visited. The corridor narrowed as they moved deeper, the smooth surfaces becoming more segmented, more layered. Thin seams ran along the walls like joints in something designed to open, but currently choosing not to. Jordan slowed, scanning the environment. This place is hiding something. The engineer's voice lowered. This sector contains legacy systems, older infrastructure integrated into the current network. Jordan raised an eyebrow. Older as in outdated, or older as in, we don't touch that because it still works somehow? A pause, the second. Great, Jordan muttered. My favorite kind of problem. Kira glanced at him. You sound excited. I am, he said. That's the worrying part. They reached a junction where the light dimmed further, and for the first time the flow patterns along the walls became irregular, not obviously broken, but less confident. Jordan crouched slightly, studying the faint glow. There you are. Kira stepped closer. What do you see? Relief, he said. She blinked. Relief? This section isn't compensating as much, Jordan explained, which means the problem is closer. The engineer looked uneasy. This area has not shown any faults. That's because it's the source, Jordan replied. Sources don't complain. They cause complaints. Kira folded her arms. That's annoyingly logical. I try. He stood again, eyes scanning the corridor ahead. At the far end, a sealed door stood embedded in the wall. No visible handle, no obvious interface, just a smooth surface that reflected the faint ambient light. That's it, Jordan said. The engineer stiffened. That chamber is restricted even to senior staff. Kira didn't hesitate. Open it. I cannot. You can. I should not. Jordan stepped forward, examining the door. It's already active, he said. You can feel it. Kira moved beside him. Active how? Listening, Jordan replied. The engineer frowned. Doors do not listen. Jordan glanced at him. Everything in this place listens. He leaned slightly closer to the surface, watching the faint distortions in the reflection. Tiny shifts that didn't quite align with their movements. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Definitely listening." Kira tilted her head. "So what do we do? Ask politely?" Jordan considered that. "It might work." The engineer looked horrified. "You cannot negotiate with a security system." Jordan shrugged. "I've negotiated with worse." He raised his hand, not touching the surface, just hovering close, and spoke, his tone calm, almost conversational. "Look, I know you're doing your job," he said, "and I respect that, but whatever's behind you is causing problems for the rest of the system. So if you could not be difficult, that'd be great." Silence. Kira stared at him. "You're serious?" "Completely." The engineer opened his mouth to object, and then stopped. The surface of the door shifted, not dramatically, not suddenly, just a faint ripple, like a thought passing through it. Jordan blinked. "Huh." Kira's eyes widened slightly. "Did you just—" "I might have," he said. The door did not open, but it did something else. A thin line of light appeared at its center, pulsing once, soft, deliberate. Jordan stepped back slightly. "Okay, that's new." The engineer stared at the door as if it had betrayed him personally. "This system does not respond to verbal input." "It just did," Jordan said. Kira looked between them, then at the door. "What does that mean?" Jordan tilted his head, watching the faint pulse repeat, steady, rhythmic. "It means," he said slowly, "this system isn't just running on standard protocols." The engineer's voice dropped. "That is not possible." Jordan smiled faintly. "It's happening." Kira stepped closer to the door, her expression shifting from curiosity to something more focused. "Is it aware?" Jordan hesitated. "Not like a person," he said, "but not like a machine either." The pulse quickened slightly, as if responding to the attention. The corridor felt different now, less silent, more expectant. Kira looked at him. "So what's the problem?" Jordan's gaze remained on the door. "The problem," he said quietly, "is that whatever's behind this isn't just malfunctioning." The light pulsed again, sharper this time. "It's adapting." The engineer took a step back. "We should not proceed." Jordan exhaled slowly. "We definitely should." Kira didn't move. "Can you open it?" Jordan glanced at her, then back at the door. "Yeah," he said. "I think it wants me to." The pulse steadied, almost like confirmation. Jordan flexed his fingers slightly, then stepped forward. "All right," he murmured. "Let's see what you've been hiding." The door did not resist this time. It began to open. The chamber beyond the door did not resemble the rest of the palace. There was no elegance here, no flowing light designed to impress. The walls were layered with older materials, darker, denser, etched with faint patterns that looked less like decoration and more like instructions left behind by someone who had long since stopped explaining themselves. At the center stood a compact structure, nothing like the grand rotating nexus above, yet somehow heavier in presence. It hummed, not loudly, not aggressively, but with a quiet persistence that felt intentional. Jordan stepped inside first, slower than usual, his usual confidence tempered by something closer to respect. "Okay," he said under his breath. "This is definitely the part where things get interesting." Kira followed, her eyes adjusting to the dimmer light. "This is older." "Much older," Jordan replied. "This isn't just infrastructure. This is foundation." The engineer remained near the doorway, clearly reconsidering every decision that had led him here. "This system predates the current palace design. It was integrated, not replaced." Jordan nodded. "Yeah, I can see that." He approached the central structure, studying it carefully. Unlike the systems above, this one did not try to hide its complexity. Layers of circuitry, if they could even be called that, shifted slowly, almost organically, as if responding to something beyond simple commands. "That's not standard architecture," he said. Kira stepped closer. "Then what is it?" Jordan hesitated. "Adaptive." The word lingered. The faint pulse they had seen at the door echoed here, Stronger now, more defined. It wasn't random, it was structured, rhythmic, like communication. The engineer shook his head. Impossible. This system was never designed for independent processing. Jordan glanced back at him. Then it learned. Silence settled over the room. Kira looked at the structure, her expression shifting. Not fear, but realization. It's been compensating for itself. Exactly, Jordan said. Something in here started drifting, so it adjusted. Then the rest of the system had to adjust to it. And that's what we've been seeing, she said. The symptom, he replied. The structure pulsed again, brighter this time. Jordan didn't step back. Instead, he stepped closer. Kira noticed immediately. What are you doing? Listening, he said. You said that before. I still don't know what it means. He smiled faintly. Neither do I, but it seems to like that approach. The engineer looked deeply uncomfortable. You should not interact with it directly. Jordan glanced at him. It already interacted with me. That does not make it safe. Nothing here is safe, Jordan replied calmly. It's just stable enough. The pulse shifted again, changing rhythm. Jordan tilted his head slightly, watching. Yeah, he murmured. You're trying to fix something, aren't you? Kira blinked. You're talking to it again. It's talking first. The structure emitted a faint, almost inaudible tone, different from before. Not a warning, not an alarm, something else. Jordan exhaled slowly. You're overloaded. Kira stepped closer. What? It's handling too much, he said. It adapted to a small problem, but then kept adapting. Now it's compensating for its own compensations. The engineer frowned. That would create a recursive instability. Exactly, Jordan said. It's not failing. It's stuck. The pulse grew sharper, uneven now. Kira looked at him. Can you fix it? Jordan hesitated, not because he didn't know how, but because he understood what it meant. I can help it stop trying to do everything at once, he said. That sounds like fixing it. It's not, he replied. It's letting it be what it was supposed to be. The engineer shook his head. Altering a foundational system is better than letting it collapse the entire network, Jordan said. Kira met his gaze. Do it. He nodded once, then stepped forward. The interface here was different. There were no clear controls, no obvious points of interaction. But the patterns, those were familiar, not in form, but in behavior. Jordan placed his hand lightly against the surface. The pulse reacted immediately, flaring brighter. Easy, he said quietly. You're doing too much. Kira watched, holding her breath without realizing it. Jordan closed his eyes briefly, focusing, not on the structure itself, but on the rhythm beneath it, the imbalance, the constant correction, the strain. Yeah, he murmured. I see it. His fingers moved slightly, not pressing, but guiding, adjusting a sequence, interrupting a feedback loop that had been reinforcing itself for too long. The pulse stuttered. The chamber seemed to hold its breath. Then it changed, not abruptly, not dramatically, but steadily. The erratic rhythm smoothed. The sharp fluctuations softened. The hum deepened, stabilizing into something quieter, more at ease. Jordan stepped back slowly. There, he said. Kira blinked. That's it. That's it. The engineer stared at the structure, scanning it with his device. For the first time, the readings shifted. Clear, measurable changes. Stability increasing, he said, almost in disbelief. Jordan nodded. It stopped trying to fix everything at once. Kira looked at the structure, then back at him. You didn't repair it. No, Jordan said. I just reminded it what its job was. The chamber felt different now, lighter, not because something had been added, but because something unnecessary had been removed. The pulse continued, but now it was steady, quiet, intentional, like a system no longer arguing with itself. Kira exhaled slowly, a faint smile forming. You did it. Jordan shrugged lightly. It did most of the work. I just got it out of its own way. The engineer lowered his device, still processing. This changes everything. Jordan glanced at him. It fixes everything. Kira stepped closer to Jordan, her expression softer now, but no less certain. And you were the one who saw it. He shook his head slightly. I just noticed it wasn't comfortable. She smiled. That's not something most people would notice. Most people don't spend their time listening to machines complain, he said. She laughed quietly. For a moment they stood there in the quiet hum of the stabilized system, the tension that had built across days dissolving into something calmer, clearer. Then Kira looked at him again, more thoughtful this time. When I met you, she said, you treated me like I was just someone with a broken transport. You were, Jordan replied. She tilted her head. And now? He considered it, then smiled faintly. Now you're someone with a much bigger system to worry about. She laughed again, softer. And you're still going to treat me the same way? Jordan nodded. That's the plan. Kira held his gaze for a moment longer, then nodded as well. Good. Behind them, the system continued its steady rhythm. No longer strained, no longer hiding, just working. And for the first time since entering the palace, Jordan didn't feel like an outsider standing inside something unfamiliar. He felt like someone who understood it, not completely, but enough. And sometimes he realized that was all that mattered.